Welcome to It's a Woman's World, a show which discusses any and all topics under the sun from a woman's point of view. Here's today's moderator, Nadia Jordana.
Hello and welcome to It's a Woman's World. I'm Nadia Jordana. Our guest today is Mary Jo Wiseman. She is a certified meeting professional and she's here to tell us all about what that entails. But first, let me introduce you to the co-hosts. Jamila Pettiford, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's always good to have you on the show.
And yes, and thank you for having me, Nadia. It is.
And Ali Naithani.
Hello, so happy to be with you all today.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen you. It's so great.
It has been a while.
And let's go talk to Mary Jo Wiseman. Mary Jo, good to have you on the show today.
Thanks, and thanks for having me, Nadia. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'll start with the first question and ask you, I know that at one point you said you did not set out to have a career as a meeting planner. How did that happen? Tell us how this all began.
Well, I don't think I really started out to have a career, period. I've never been one to plan, which is strange that I ended up being a meeting planner. But before I was a corporate meeting planner, I worked for 5 years at Metropolitan State University. And for 3 years, I worked in their grants and development office as more of an office manager and a prospect researcher. But as part of that, we had a board of trustees that we reported to, and they did quarterly board meetings and then went on to do other meetings with corporate executives when they were going through a development campaign. So that's really when I got my start planning meetings, but I didn't even know that there were people out there in organizations that actually did that there was a profession. It was about the time too, I don't know if you remember, there was a TV series out there called Hotel. And it was with James Brolin when he was young and Connie Selica. And they worked in an upscale hotel. He was general manager and she was his assistant. And I thought at the time that that would have been a great role to be in, but didn't quite know how to get there either. But that's kind of how I got my start.
I remember that show, and you would have probably been good at that, but now you have a wonderful career.
Right.
Ali, did you have a question?
Yeah, so I'd love to hear about the book you wrote and tell us why you decided to write that and what you hope to accomplish with it.
Well, the book is called, thanks for asking. The book is called The Meeting Planning Process, A Guide to Planning Successful Meetings. And I've always thought that there's a right way and a wrong way to plan meetings. There's a process and a plan, and things need to be done in a certain order in order for it to be, the meeting to be successful. I mean, you have to have your goals and objectives. Do you want your key messages out there and how you're going to deliver them, who you're going to deliver them to, who your target audience is. And there's got to be, you know, a timeline and a task list. And above all, you need really good people in your corner to help you. You need to surround yourself with a group of individuals who can help you get this done, because I've also firmly believed that it's not just one person that is responsible for the meeting or can get the meeting done. And with that being said, I always wanted to write something where somebody that doesn't have the experience, isn't maybe a professional meeting planner, maybe is just new to the process, something where they would have a structured guide to take them through the process and help them. So that's where that the book came kind of to be.
Jamila, did you have something?
I did. Many years ago, HQ Global Workplaces, organization that provided administrative staff for people that were displaced out of their headquarter office. And that was the first time that I learned about professional corporate meeting planners. Folks who planned everything from the cocktail parties to the corporate meetings, from the traveling, the airplane. Do you do all of those things? Do you set up all of the corporate fundraisers, the different events? Do you set up the travel back and forth? Is it kind of a contracting job where you jump in and you contract with an organization? Do they hire you on staff?
Well, as a corporate meeting planner, I did most of those things, or I knew the people to go to. I didn't make, for instance, people's airline reservations. Their assistants did that, but we had a travel provider that we used that everybody had to go through, so that I was able to get like the flight manifest from everybody. So I knew when everybody was coming in, and I could coordinate with the ground transportation company to have them picked up. I did all of the site search and selection process, determined, looked for the right spaces, the right hotels, the right resorts, depending on the type of meeting that it was, negotiated the contracts for that, did all the details. I mean, worked with the hotel or the caterers or whoever it was that I was working with to do all the details, to plan the meetings, I did all of the communication that went out to the people that were attending the meetings, so they knew how to make their reservations, what to expect, what to wear, where they were going, type of weather, safety precautions, whatever. So I did that. There were times on the transportation side, you are working a lot of times with destination management companies. You may be working with AV companies, production companies, graphic artists. I, needed all of those people to help me do that. I mean, I could write all the information that I needed to get to the people. I could put an invitation together, but I am not a graphic artist. I can tell them the colors I wanted. I could tell somebody the look that I wanted. I could give them that information, but it was up to the graphic designer to come up with that design. That's not my bailiwick, and I knew that. So I would go with my strengths and pull on the strengths of other people to help me get that meeting done.
With this, is this like a contracting thing that you do, or is it, do they hire you on as a staff member and you kind of work as needed, or?
No, I was definitely a member of the staff. I was a corporate meeting planner, and I did meeting planning was my job, 100% of my job for the time that I was in that role. So there are companies, and there may be times when companies, maybe they have just a planner and they've got, multiple meetings that they have to plan, and then they would, contract out at that time. And I, now that I'm not working, I can go out there and work as a contractor anywhere, actually. I've done trip directing for people. I like to go, on site when the meeting is taking place. If, you need additional staff. I've done registration work. There's a lot of elements of the planning process where you need extra attention and extra assistance at certain times. And so we you kind of can fill in on those various roles.
Well, yeah, I think there's so many different aspects of this that I hadn't really thought of. And as I was thinking about the conversation we're having today, last spring we had a staff retreat planned, a big meeting offsite, and an hour before we were about to begin, on our way to the event, the facilitator called me and said, I've just had a car accident and I can't be there to facilitate this day-long session. So what I'm getting at is, I think in meeting planning, you have to be flexible, you have to be calm, and you have to have a sense about you. And it feels like to me, in like the hour up until the meeting starts, I've learned through some hard experience, as the person in charge, don't be too busy at that time. Be ready to be flexible, be ready to, so Mary Jo, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what do you do when something just goes wrong?
Well, you kind of have to, beforehand, there are contingency planning or contingency plans. And you really need to talk about, some of those what ifs and be prepared, have a backup plan. One of the first things that I do when I go on site for a meeting is we always set up an office. Actually, we called it a war room. And that's where the planners, and I always had an AV person and an IT person as our staff. We brought security in many cases. And there were multiple support people there that were in that office. And everybody had certain roles, but you needed to really set up that office and you functioned just like you were in your own office. But one of the things that we always did too is took the group through, like if you were in a hotel, you walked that space, you walked the meeting space, you knew where the office was, you knew where all parts of the hotel was, where everybody was and what everybody's role was in that hotel, how to get out of the meeting room if you had to get out of the meeting room in an emergency, where were the different exits, those kind of things. So you really have to be aware of all of that going in. And I think that the better planning that you do going in, the less trouble you're going to have when you get on site. And there are things that happen that are kind of beyond your control. I mean, if the lights go out, if somehow, the sprinkler system goes off, and those are things that are, beyond your control, really. You have no idea that that's going to happen. But you can react to those kind of things, I think, much better, much calmer, and calm is the key, than if you hadn't been prepared. I was doing a meeting, and it was my first big senior management meeting, and I was in Tucson, Arizona at a lovely resort. And I was there for a number of days, and I was mid-program, and I had to go to the front desk for something and ask for something. And this woman said to me, she called me Ms. Wiseman, she said, I have to tell you, I have watched you while you've been here. And she said, you are so pleasant and you always have a smile on your face. And I was just kind of dumbstruck. I didn't know how to respond. I just said, really? Because I think that's the way that I am, or that's the way that I try to be, although I don't know that I do it with any real purpose. And she said, yes. She said, I can't tell you how many people come to this desk and are nasty and mean and yell. And I'm going, really? I was just surprised. And I told her, I said, I'm having a hard time believing that, but I'm sure that it is true. But I said, I can only tell you that, when I come on site, I feel that I'm pretty well prepared, or as prepared as I can be. I have all the details that I need, and I've done them, and I've talked to everybody. And there will be times where things will come up and things will need changing. Somebody will want to do maybe another breakout, or they'll want to switch times, or they'll want to do this or that. And you can make those little changes and not get ruffled if you have all the other things in place. And I think it's easier to be that way. The other thing is that I always saw me and my position as being in the background. I was never one to be up front. I think of myself as a quiet leader, or somebody that leads and coaches and shows by example and by doing. So I think that has helped me, and people know when I'm there, they know where I am. They can see me in the back of the room, and I usually have my clipboard and my pencil, and I look like I'm in charge. I may not feel inside that I am in charge. I can't tell you that my stomach doesn't do little flip-flops, but it does, and it did. But it's the image and how you project. And
I have a piggyback question on what your recent comments were. It's one thing with incidents that happen and try to throw you off during an event. But what about people? Do you get many difficult people, or people that just maybe don't get what you're trying to do? Things like that where you're sidetracked by handling someone else?
honestly, not many.
Good.
I might have been on site where I would say people are not, they're not mean. I never encountered anyone that was mean or, mean spirited. There were a lot of changes when we would do a large meeting every year for like our top performing agents and brokers and whatever. And part of the program was group activities. And they may be doing golfing, they may be touring, they may be doing spa visits or whatever. And I was the one that was tracking all of that. And inevitably, you have people coming on site who wanted to change their schedule. They wanted to do a spa treatment on this day at this time instead of this day and this time. So there was a lot of back and forth that way, but never anybody that wasn't nice. So I may have been really lucky. I don't know, but
Oh, that's really uplifting to hear. I mean, that's really remarkable too, because I think when you work with what I would say the general public and different obligations, and particularly I think like in this field, there's a lot of pressure, I would presume, to get things right, high expectations, we're spending lots of money, so that's pretty remarkable. And frankly, in today's world, what a great story to be able to say that people were nice, and that's what you experienced. I think that's great.
yes, and I have to say too that, and I talk about this a little bit in my book, I worked for under 3 different CEOs, or there were 3 CEO changes throughout my 24-year career. And each one of those CEOs, and I didn't report to them directly for the most part, but I worked very closely with them in their office and other people. they all had different work styles, different personalities, but they all had a very good understanding of what we as meeting planners do, what my responsibility was, and they were always very good to me, and always respectful, always kind.
Question. For a young woman who likes this story, who likes planning things, who feels organized, who loves being an administrative assistant, who loves being in service to other people, what words of advice would you give them coming out of college, or maybe not even, coming out of college, but already kind of doing this work? What would you give them as a word of advice to really go far and to have a, extended career as you have?
I think to really go for it. There are a lot of administrative professionals out there who are actually doing meeting planning as part of their job already. And I think there is a great correlation between the skills of, say, your administrative professionals and the meeting planners, in that they have to be, we're leaders. We are detail oriented. We are strategic. We're analytical. You can see the big picture. And those are traits that I think both meeting planners and administrative professionals have. The people coming out of college, for the most part, I think, are probably majoring in hospitality and event management. So they already know what's out there. It's just getting out there and making those contacts, and maybe doing, an internship and whatever. I actually, when I started with the St. Paul companies, which became Travelers, I started in their HR department. I wasn't a meeting planner, because at that point I still didn't know that there were people doing meeting planning. I mean, this was back in the mid-'80s, so it's been a while. And once I learned that there was a conference services area, I actually did an informational interview. And I did that with the vice president of the area that that group reported to. And it was lucky for me at that time, because there was a manager and a part-time, she was more like an administrative assistant more than a planner, but they were talking about changing that position, making it a full-time position, making it a full-time meeting planning position. So the timing for me was just perfect. But I ended up talking to that person for, I bet I spent a good hour in there talking about, what I had done before, what I wanted to do, what they were kind of looking at. And had I not done that interview, or that informational interview, I probably would never have known that the position still existed, because I wasn't into really looking at their job posting boards and stuff. It didn't really cross my mind, because I think too, when I started, I wasn't thinking that I was going to be working for the rest of my life. That was not my plan, but that changed. And then you look at things a little bit differently. But I think just getting out there, networking, doing some volunteer work, looking at those, maybe some of the nonprofits, some of the associations, where you can make a difference, and where you can fit in, and where you can learn, I think would be good for anybody coming out of college or out of school.
Yeah, Mary Jo, I work in HR, human resources, and so I want to plug that informational interview, and especially for any viewers out there wondering about career change or I've always wanted to do this, do those things. Look at how you just gave a perfect illustration of how that changed for you, changed your life, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you had also said something at the beginning of this conversation that I just really wanted to ask all of us. Like, you said, are you a planner? Like in my life, in my family, we talk about, oh, you're such a planner. Of course, you have everything perfectly organized, or you're not a planner. Like I have people in my family who are very proud not to be planners. Like they go at the last minute and they get everything done. And they don't worry about the details. They know what they have to do, and they're perfectly fine in that kind of how they describe themselves. And then, so again, folks on the other spectrum side who say, nope, I'm going to have everything planned out and detail oriented. So I was just wondering, Nadia and Jamila, how do you describe yourself? Would you say you're a planner?
I would say I definitely need to plan ahead if I'm going to do something. Don't call me up and say, let's run out for a cup of coffee. No, don't make me do that. And it's more of a psychological thing. So yes, I do need to plan. I'm not the extreme of a planner, but I do need to plan in some form.
Mhm. And I
Jamila?
would have to say, in my work, I do have to do a lot of planning. I manage 7 people, and oftentimes in that work, and then we work with 375 participants. So in that work, there is a lot of planning. There's a lot of meetings. There's a lot of budgeting. So there's a lot of things though that I learned many years ago when I worked as a telecommunications specialist at HQ Global Workplaces, it was a corporate office that did meeting planning for executive folks that were in town, and they needed an executive office and an executive team. And so I learned a lot of those skills at that time. And so I can really identify with Ms. Wiseman as far as a lot of the stuff that she was doing, because a lot of that stuff we had to do, and we had to work together as a team, and we had to plan, and we had to communicate, and we only had a budget of so much, so you could not overspend. You had to have it together. So I really identify with Mary Jo as far as the stuff that she has done in these years. And so yes, planning. Yeah.
Well, and on that, we are out of time. It has been so great. This was interesting. Thank you, Ali and Jamila, for being on the show today and co-hosting with me. And Mary Jo, you were just a treat. This was really interesting. I had no idea what goes on in the background. Thank you for
Good.
being
No, it's my pleasure to be here. I'm happy to do this. It's a little bit out of my comfort zone, but it was fun.
You were great. And thank you all for watching It's a Woman's World. We'll see you next time.